Excellent. Good afternoon. Welcome to History of Economic Thought 1. I just handed back your term paper proposals. I'm going to say a little bit about them. First of all, this was a 5-point assignment, and so basically I think everybody at least got 5 points. There were mostly, first of all, these were really interesting. Sometimes I get a bunch of, typically I get them, I think, they might or might not be interesting, but these looked interesting, so I'm kind of looking forward to seeing what you do with them. You've got your term paper proposal back, you're ready to, and if it's approved, you're ready to go. If you're not, there were a few of them where I said redo, resubmit, something like that. Okay, well, just you've got points, but there was something about the assignment or about your proposal that doesn't quite work. So I want you to redo if I said that. Sometimes it's just changing things, sometimes it's doing something totally different, but I think everybody in here was just changing, maybe modifying or something. So now you've got your proposal. Start working on it now. It's approved, get going. Find sources, research. I actually have sources for some things, and I wrote on your papers, but even if I didn't write that I have possible sources, I might have ideas for something if you need something. A couple of comments that I will make about these proposals and that would be worth thinking about. One is, let's see, first of all, style. This is more for the paper, not for the proposal. But remember that this is economics. This is not literature class or English class. And it's quite all right to write language that is interesting, but you are kind of weird if you do that in economics. It's not quite right, but this is academic economics. So there is a certain sense in which an English professor would say, oh, this is awful writing. It just says what we're going to do, and then it does it, and then it says what you've done, and it's just so straightforward. Can't you be more? You don't have to be more. If that's what you did, great. Econ, it's like a scientific paper. People will appreciate it if it's direct and to the point. Okay? If you have a clever way of motivating it or language, that can be fine. I'm not against it. But I've seen some where they just get carried away because they want to be, grasping the reader's heart or something. Like, don't do that because then it gets kind of lost. Okay, that's the first thing I would say. The second, these are just sort of things that I noticed about some of these proposals. So one was a common one. This struck me as odd. But what alphabet goes here's the alphabetical order. K, H, G, F, W, T, I. I don't know, but some people were you're supposed to, on your bibliography or your works cited, you should alphabetize by last name first. And those were the orders. That was the order that I got from a couple of papers. I got a bunch of them that were like, okay, great. They're Hillsdale students. They're smart, but they don't know the alphabet. All right, good. It happens. Okay, another thing I will say is be precise. Use formal language in this. So there are lots of things we say in colloquial English that shouldn't go into an academic paper. So it's incredibly something. It should be remarkably or very or something like that, because incredible actually means not believable. So I wouldn't tend to use that one in academic writing. Okay, maybe if I say, that's incredibly good, Snickers, incredibly good. No, it's believable when you're writing about it. Another one is literal. Nobody's probably going to do this, but literal means literal. So try to be really precise and a little bit formal in your language. Another thing that I ran into once on these, but it's more common on the when we get the drafts. You know what the widows and orphans problem is in writing? I've looked it up, and there's disagreement as to which is which. But if you're writing and you say, you get your text, blah, 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 and then it says bibliography, and that's the end of the page, and the bibliography starts over here. That's either a widow or an orphan, and authorities disagree on which one's which. but that should just be not there, but start at the head of the page, right? Or if you had like section headings, the same kind of thing, right? Or things along that keep the sections together, find place to break. So that shouldn't be there. Should say bibliography there. So kind of watch that. I don't punish people, but just watch it. You're trying to write professionally now. Writing, if you can write professionally, it's a very valuable skill for you. There are people who make money out of just being able to write. They don't have to even know what they're writing about. They can take something and edit it and make it understandable to people who understand the technical material. What else do we have here? What else did I say? Some strange, well, here's one that really bugs the heck out of me that is very, very, very common. What's the difference between on and off? That's on. People are always saying it's based off of, wait, it's based on. Why do you say off of? You understand the difference between on and off of? I know that people don't ballroom dance anymore, but if you're ballroom dancing and your partner says, will you please get off of my foot, it means not the same as please get on my foot. Off of and on mean different things. So just say on. It's based on whatever, something. Anything else? One other, which is a little bit more, this is more conceptual. Economics, economic policy and economic systems are all different things. So I want to, that one's maybe not always so clear to people. I see this in writing. Economics, I'm going to call it a science. Some dispute that, but we'll call it a science or a kind of a study or something like that. And as we'll see through this course and the next one, it becomes a positive science. That is, it's how things work, whether it's good or bad. But economic policy is something different. And that's normative. So this one's positive. And this one's normative. Well, there is a difference here. People talk about policy and economics, the study, as being the same thing, and they're not. They're different things. And then there's even, we could also say, economic systems, like Marxism or capitalism or something like this. Different kinds of systems. You can think of different kinds of economic systems, and again, that's a different notion. So keep those things in mind. We're talking about how people think about the way things work. That right there, and it has consequences for these, but they're not the same thing. Here's one that might surprise you, but one thing that I really, depends on the context. I really hate it when I hear in certain contexts people talk about free market economics. Free market economics, when that's said by an economist, bothers me greatly. Because if that's how they describe themselves, I'm wondering what they're doing. You're supposed to be doing economics, and if the conclusion, the consequence is, now that we study this, actually the free market accomplishes what we want while these other systems don't, then yeah, you're an economist who's made free market conclusions. On the other hand, if you started out the way I have heard described, that I start out with the principle the free market is better, and now I try to find arguments for that, that's not economics. That's that's something else. We're going to see that as we go. We'll see that in HET too, for sure. We see that if you read Ludwig von Mises. Is he a free market economist? If you know Mises, he was a fierce advocate of the free market. So much so that he got mad and supposedly shouted at Milton Friedman that he was a socialist, which is just because he was angry. Supposedly this happened. Mises insists that economics is not free market economics. It is a positive science, and the conclusion is that Mises draws from it after studying it. If the conclusion had been different, if the conclusion Mises studies economics, oh my gosh, the socialist system works better, well, then I have to be a socialist. But that's not what he concluded. He said, study it. Oh, the free market works better. Now, obviously, when I'm at a CCA and donors come up and they're not professional economists, oh, free market economics is great. I say, yeah, right on, way to go, send money. But I appreciate that. But as you guys are now like, you're not professional economists, but you're like baby professionals or something like that, or that's what you're preparing for. So keep these things in mind, that these things are different, and that when we're doing economics, not morals, when we're doing morals, maybe there's some other arguments for, for freedom. But when we're doing this is what we're trying to, we approach this stuff sort of with an open mind, so to speak, and say, how do things work? Okay, so that's what we're doing here. And that will hopefully be reflected in your papers. This term, of course, nobody's doing anything on Keynes, but I kind of remember getting a term paper proposal on Keynes saying, that son of a gun, that bad person, or whatever. And I'm going to show that Keynes is a bad. That's not the way to do it. Start out and say, I'm going to dispassionately evaluate Keynes' ideas. And if the conclusion that I reach is, after analyzing them fairly, presenting them fairly and analyzing them fairly, that they're not so good, so be it. But I'm going to go into it fairly. So that's what you should do when you do these things. Okay? Good. It actually will make your papers good reading too. So, and I know that sometimes I'm reading stuff and I think, oh, hurry up, hit them. But I'm not going to urge you to do that. So, any questions? Okay, well, everything is crystal clear. Yes, maybe, sort of. Good. I've asked several people why the second section of HET is, not people who are in the class, but why is the second section of HET very talkative and you guys are quiet? Everybody says, oh, it's because they just had lunch. There is the other hypothesis that you're just trying to be like Aquinas. But anyway, you remember what Aquinas said. Speaking of Aquinas, we finished the Scholastics. The Scholastic movement, so we're going to pick up our class material now. Any questions or anything to? Okay. Oh, one announcement. On November 14th, the Outdoor Adventures is hosting the first annual Hillsdale College half marathon. It's got a 4-hour time cutoff. If you can't walk a half marathon in 4 hours, then do the 10K or the 5K.
Are you going to be participating?
I think I might be the first person to have signed up. Of course.
Half marathon?
Half marathon, yeah.
Do we get incentives if we try to beat you?
If you can't beat me, you get points deducted.
What's your half pace?
What did it used to be? Right now, I don't know. I've been running ultramarathons and I seem to have gotten slower with time. I don't know. On this course, the course will go out on, starts at Central Hall, Barber Drive, and out on Half Moon Lake, and then comes back the same way. Gary Wolfram's best half marathon was 1 hour 8. I think mine was probably about 1 hour 20. But I don't think I could do 10K in that. Never mind. It's not, I could do a 10K in that, but it's not, not what I'm going to do. So I'd be happy if I just go out and do a couple hours or so, or something like that. So Wolfram is actually going to have surgery first part of October. And we've been talking about it. He thinks he's going to do the 5K and hike it as his first thing after surgery. So go out and support Wolfram if nothing else. Okay? Great. Maybe I should give extra credit for that. Everybody march along with Wolfram, sing economic songs or something. All right. Tonight, they've changed the name of the group, so I don't even know what it is, but the Jewish students group is showing a film next door at 6:30 p.m. about the Six-Day War and the liberation or takeover of the return of Israel gets Jerusalem in the Six-Day War. So that might be interesting. Anything else? then let's proceed, because we're now we've been talking about the scholastics and scholasticism, which I think is quite interesting, and we're going to now shift to the next. It's a paradigm shift in a sense. Maybe it's not quite fair to call it a paradigm shift because it's a totally different set of people, but it's certainly a different way of looking at things, the mercantilists. The scholastics continue, the School of Salamanca, into the 1500s. They're quite interesting, and they are, maybe some have said, Proto-Austrians or something like that. They've got very similar ideas to things that later become Austrian economics, and they're worth taking a look at. We'll pass them up now. So this is a great shift in Western thought when we get to mercantilism. Read, by the way, chapter 3 of your Econ and Hebert text, and also there's some readings like Thomas Munn and others in the reader. So these are post-medieval writers, and the range is from the 1500s to the 1700s, and some might say all the way till today, in a sense. Well, who are these people? They are merchants. That's why it's called, that's one reason it's called mercantilism. Merchants, government officials, and such people. They are men of action, and they are men. I don't think there are any female writers here. They are people who would think of themselves as men of the world. They are directing society. And Adam Smith calls them statesmen. When he calls them that, he's not being, he thinks it's an insult, kind of. But their primary concerns are not morality. They don't have a great deal of thought about ethics the way that the scholastics did. They're talking about wealth, and they are talking about power, and power of the state, wealth of the state, and also their own wealth and power. And they're pretty clear on that. So why do we get this shift? Well, here's one of our little quick economic history stories. So we first of all have the rise of the nation state. Feudalism collapses. And the rise of the nation state as the predominant political organization. The Treaty of Westphalia is the thing that formalizes that. That ends the 30 Years' War. You're familiar with the treaty? I don't know if it's 1648? Yeah, 1648. You're familiar with this idea? Maybe not. Do you hear about this? Treaty of Westphalia. Who knows besides history majors? Nobody. Wow, you should know at least a little bit about it. 30 Years' War is this incredibly horrendous bloodletting in Europe, where they're fighting over, ostensibly it's Catholic versus Protestant. It is over whether or not the papal authority will rule in states and who decides what kind of religion will be within a country. And there are all kinds of political aspects to it, political power. France, which is basically Catholic, fights on the side of the Protestants, so it's not just, you can see that it's ostensibly religious. It is a religious war. But this horrible war ends with this, and this treaty holds that domestic politics, domestic conditions will be the responsibility of the domestic government, of the national government, and not outsiders. Okay? The government within the state decides what goes on there, and it's not everybody else's business to butt in. That's kind of the principle, so that the nation state, the government becomes sort of the center of it. You know, the Pope or other countries are supposed to not worry about domestic policy. If you're going to go to war, it's over some sort of international clash. Great. Anyway, so this is kind of foundational for the development of the modern nation state. There's a lot that can be said about that, but we'll not talk about that. Well, here we have the decline of feudalism. And the feudal manor and that method of organization is no longer the basis of how society is organized politically. And one of the things that happens is the divine right of kings develops. Kings of countries become extremely powerful. the king, that's where we get divine right of kings idea develops. Appointed by God to run things for whatever. Another thing that happens is decline of the church authority. So when I say the church, of course I mean the Catholic Church. Well, the state has now become a more powerful entity within its borders. It's the king who decides what the religion will be, in a sense. The government will do this. But there are other things that happen here with this decline, because it's the Protestant Reformation has occurs, and Martin Luther puts out his 95 Theses in 1517. Your textbook points at the Econ Hebert book points out that this reduces the doctrinal unity that had unified the West. So the West has a common set of beliefs, but it's split now. We've got more division. And so the church is weaker with respect to temporal rulers. Okay, civil authorities now have more strength and the church less. Another thing that happens has happened here is the Renaissance. Renaissance is a rebirth of learning, and so more focus on secular matters that comes from the Renaissance. And we have the spread of knowledge and the spread of literacy compared to what there had been. So the printing press is developed, the Gutenberg press, and so there's much more dissemination of books and things like that. They don't have to be hand copied. Another thing that comes about is the Reconnaissance. This one doesn't get mentioned so much. There must be some way to spell all this right. More or less there. The Reconnaissance only has one C in it, though. That's all he did put in. So that's the exploration of the world. There are various inventions. Notice there was an invention here that was important, which is the printing press. Well, here we have the astrolabe and the compass, and world travel becomes possible. That fosters trade, and it fosters colonization. You can't colonize the New World or Africa or something if you can't get there. And now it becomes possible to go to Asia and other places. So the Reconnaissance is discovery of the world, moving around. And so there's this time of this kind of, these changes. And there's an increase in international commerce. And this is also the time, because of that we start getting very large, officially chartered by the Crown companies, trading companies. So for example, the British East India Company. I think somebody's doing a term paper on the directors of the East India Company, because these were people who wrote mercantilist doctrines. They wrote economic ideas. Thomas Munn, one of the most important ones, one of the most important mercantilist writers, is the director of the East India Company. Well, they're founded in 1600, and they are then given a monopoly over trade with the East. Okay, great. All right, good. So that's kind of the ferment, the things that are going on here. We see these powerful people emerging, and they start writing about economics. Why did feudalism decline, and why do we see this rise of the nation state? Anyone have theories about it? Or I think there are several, but anyone? Joseph? Oh, yes, and your name again is? Will. Will. Is it, what do you go by?
Will.
Will?
Yeah.
Okay.
Was part of it due to the fact that a third of Europe was wiped out by the plague, and they needed people to sort of, like the feudalism structure wasn't feasible anymore because there just weren't enough people to make it all work, so they sort of had to transition into a more mercantilist economy / political structure.
With the Black Plague, the heavy death toll, there's enormous economic shock and change, and I think that is part of it. Why don't they just repopulate and then get back to the old equilibrium?
As new technologies develop and better sanitation standards, like sewer systems, cities start to develop, and then that centralizes more citizenry away from farms and stuff.
Okay. There's the growth of these cities. There's one other technological development that I'm going to mention too. Anyone else? I mean, there are a number of factors. Anytime you look at historical developments, you say, oh, this caused that, along with a whole bunch of other causal factors. Douglas North has pointed out one that he thinks is, well, he's got a pretty good argument for it, Douglas North, but it explains a lot. And again, 2 S's, but until he passed away relatively recently. But great economic historian and economist. And he says gunpowder. Gunpowder is crucial to this story, he says, because it gives economies of scale in warfare and a different method of warfare. And so Chinese invented gunpowder maybe 800 AD or earlier than that. It was first weaponized by the Chinese and the Japanese in the early 1200s, as far as we know. But the Europeans get it in the 1300s, and they develop it. Well, this changes the way that wars are fought. It used to be that you had knights in shining armor and longbowmen and things like this. And basically what you would do to have a war is you get all the peasants together and they go out with sticks and stuff and they fight, and then the knights run out and chop a few of them down, or a bunch of them down. How long does it take? So knight is, it takes a lot of strength and training from birth, and it's also not anybody can be a knight, but that's the really heavy troops. What else? English longbowman. How long does it take to train an English longbowman? One of the most feared things on the battlefield. It's a lifetime skill. Just to be strong enough to draw the bow, you have to grow into that. And they're dangerous and they're skillful. And now suddenly we have this invention, the firearm. And the way these things work is you teach somebody to pour gunpowder in, okay? Tamp it down, drop in a ball, tamp it down. Great, you got that, and then you've got, it's probably a match lock or something, and so you've got a match that's burning, pull it back, you go like this. They don't even put sights on them, of course, at first. And you pull the trigger and you hope it doesn't blow up, because about 10% of the time the thing just explodes. But the rest of the time this ball goes flying out, and if you put a big line of people, I just gave you all the training you need to be an infantryman. You don't have to train with a longbow or a sword. You can now be an infantryman in those days. And we'll put enough of you up in line and the knights don't have a chance against you. Economies of scale in warfare. Now the trick is masses of low-skilled infantry can defeat the armored knights and the skilled archers, but we got to buy a whole bunch of them. We got to buy a bunch of guns and ammo and gunpowder and hire a bunch of these people. And so now wars will not be won by the strongest and the bravest, as North points out, but by whoever can put together the biggest army, sort of. And so this is a different world. We've got this increased trade and commerce, international trade, secular and material world, rise of the nation state, and the importance of having a big treasury for a government, because they can hire mercenaries. Well, we can hire a bunch of Swiss to come fight for us or whatever. The Swiss become mercenaries for a while. Anyway, so the mercantilism is this shift where they begin addressing these kinds of concerns. Morality, we'll leave that to the church. But we're talking about how do we, I'll occasionally switch from one country to another. How do we, the English, survive against the French? Okay, they're the bad ones, we're the good ones. The French aren't really bad. But I'll have to change sides occasionally. Anyway, so great. Now, sometimes mercantilism is equated with just being trade protectionism. And while they tended to be very protectionist in trade, it goes well beyond that, as we'll see. All kinds of policies that they think will strengthen their state. And the other thing about it is that I'm listing this as a school of thought. These guys would have been shocked to hear that people think of them as a school of thought. They were all arguing with each other. They didn't agree on things. Who named them this? It was a Frenchman by the name of Mirabeau, who said, they're the mercantilists and they're the enemy. We have to defeat them. Free market guy. And Adam Smith grabs the name from Mirabeau and says, yes, the mercantilists. This is the thing that is bad. We have to defeat this set of ideas. And so it's their opponents who invent this term and label them as a as a kind of a school. And they do kind of fit together in many respects. So let's talk really quickly about the two senses in which we can think of this. And one of them is that it is a set of economic doctrines. It is a set of ideas. And they disagree, but they've got a lot of commonalities, and we'll see those. The other thing is that it is, in another sense, it's an economic system. It's the system that they set up to try to promote this. And so your textbook calls it the doctrinal view versus the process view. When it says process view, it means it as an economic system. Okay, and then they're defending it. So the doctrines that they promote are the importance of treasure, the importance of international trade. They have various ideas on money that are in conflict, and all kinds of ideas about how do we make our domestic economy flourish. And the ideas are pretty interventionistic normally. They're trying to make informed policy, and they actually make some progress in it, but some of it is just like lots of fallacies. If we think of it, though, instead as an economic system, it is interventionism, it is trade restrictions, subsidies, monopoly, regulation, rent seeking, trying to get as many personal benefits from the government as you can. That's kind of what the system really fast amounts to. So, good. So that's what we're going to talk about. I will even skip some of, well, what should I say? I've got, such wonderful quotes. So I'll skip them. You'll be the poorer for it. No, you won't. They're not that important. Let's start out and treat mercantilism as a set of doctrines. So this is the way I will emphasize it, but we'll do something maybe in the next lecture on mercantilism as policy. And the other thing we'll do is that at this point, I'm going to go through the, kind of the highlights of mercantilism. And then I'm going to do a couple of lectures about particular people. And that's going to set up the development of the development of classical economics, of real economics, I think. And so we'll see that. But this is where, in my opinion, the course really starts to take off shortly. Okay. So far, it's been boring. It's been training wheels. It'll get good. Anyway, let's go with mercantilism as doctrine, the doctrinal approach. Mercantilist doctrine. And number one is treasure. The importance of treasure. What is treasure? Well, treasure is gold, silver, and jewels. That's what the ultimate, in some sense, the ultimate objective is. Now, they understand that there are other kinds of wealth, but they have some, almost an idea that the goal is to amass as much of this as possible. Get as much treasure as possible, get it into the government treasury, or also a certain amount into your pocket. They understand that there are other kinds of wealth, but this is somehow seen to be more significant, better. Sir William Petty, I wasn't going to read the quotes, but Sir William Petty says, he's kind of a quasi-mercantilist. He says, trade which does store the country with gold, silver, jewels, etc., is profitable before all others. Okay. If you get lots of grain, that's okay. If you get lots of other stuff, but gold, that's the best thing. Okay. And Thomas Munn says, if you want to enrich the nation, enriching the nation means increasing its total stock of treasure. That's how you become rich. You maximize that. Why would that make any sense at all? Can you defend it? How are you going to buy all the guns, gunpowder, and hire all the mercenaries and people to fight the war? So maybe in a world like this, it makes you got to strengthen, it enables the king to defend the kingdom. Okay. In a world of hard money, that's what we want. Okay. And on the other hand, you can criticize it because they have an almost mystical belief in the wonderfulness of treasure. Adam Smith and some of the scholastics make fun of them for the idea that, like, if we had like piles and piles and piles of gold, it would be better. And Smith says, look, if you had that much gold, it wouldn't be worth anything. You know, they imagine they will find fields of gold and mountains of gold, and Smith says if it becomes that common, it's worthless. If you just pick up all the gold you want. So they've got this idea that it's this mystical idea. Okay, great. Well, there's not a whole lot to say about it other than that, and that some of them are more sophisticated on these lines than others. But here's the real question. Suppose you don't have treasure. How do you get it? Well, how do you get treasure? Oh, you dig it out of the ground. That's how you get gold, silver, and jewels, right? And what if, well, we're in Britain. Well, if you dig into the ground, you get coal.
Can't you go conquer other people for their treasure?
Right? Go to war. Okay. Well, now you're sounding like Colbert. He's French.
Well, I mean, obviously you can also trade for it.
You can trade. Oh, okay. This is the big doctrine for them: trade, international trade. And Thomas Munn, head of the East India Company, puts it this way. He says, all nations who have no mines of their own are enriched with gold and silver by one and the same means, exporting. And their goal is to have exports must be greater than imports. Okay, exports, people pay you in gold. Imports, you pay them in gold. Oh, we want to make gold, we want gold. Okay, that's how we do it. And so here's how Munn puts it. He says, the ordinary means to increase our wealth and treasure is by foreign trade. This ought to be encouraged, for on it hangs the great revenue of the king, the honor of the kingdom, the noble profession of the merchant, the school of our arts, the supply of our poor, the improvement of our lands, the nursery of our mariners, the walls of the kingdom, the means of our treasure, the sinews of our wars, and the terror of our enemies. Okay. This is serious stuff. This is a life and death matter for these guys. And he thinks of it this way. We need to win at trade. It's a life or death matter. It verges on being a sacred duty to defend Britain or France or wherever we're from. And so they have this idea that trade has winners and losers. It's a zero-sum game. Trade is zero-sum. And we, of course, today would call it a zero-sum game. You guys know what a zero-sum game means. We had done a game theory. I'm going to put it up anyway. We'd done a game theory matrix before. And I don't remember. We had a prisoner's dilemma or something. Well, here's an example of a game. This is I guess a coordination game. I don't know what it is, doesn't matter. But they can go top, player one can go top, bottom, doesn't matter what they are. Player two can go left and right. And if they both go right, they each get a point. No, if they go left, if they get that combination, they each get a dollar or whatever. And if they go there, they get 2. And if they're discoordinated, they get 0. So that's a coordination game. But both sides can win in that, right? Wow, we could get there or there. Both of those are equilibrium outcomes. Well, what about a zero-sum game? That would be like this. Let's put some numbers in. -1 plus 1, 1, -1. It doesn't matter. Let's see. It will matter. 2, -2, -2, 2. Okay. What's it? Top. Left, right. Wow. Anything that this person gains, that person lost. Anything this person gains, that person lost, etc. in that one. That's a zero-sum game. The payments add up to 0. Okay, something like chess is a zero-sum game. There's a winner and a loser, or else it's a tie, a draw. Or football or sports, most sports of any kind like that you would think of it as being zero-sum in that sense. There's a winner and a loser. And for them, that's trade. The winner is the one that exports more than they import, and the loser is the one that there must be someone else who imports more than they export. They lost, and we have to win at the trade game. I know you have never heard of that idea ever, unless you pay attention to current politics or debates. But anyway, well, there are various interpretations how they see this thing. And I'll just, first of all, they all think that this is a means of increasing the stock of treasure. Well, it is, because the difference, if you have that greater than that, the difference is paid in gold or something like that. Some of them see it as a means of getting ahead of the other nation, because if we can, let's switch, now we're French for a minute. Monsieur, Madame, we have to, I won't do my accent, but we have to beat the English. If we can get more gold than they can, we've not only strengthened ourselves, but we've weakened them. Okay? It's a means of getting ahead of them in relative terms. And in fact, it's like war. Colbert says trade is just a different kind of warfare. Okay? That's all we're doing, is trying to smash the Brits, the hated English. The balance of trade, another version is, that this is that's a profit. If the trade balance is positive, the nation made profit. And if it's negative, the nation took a loss. It's a profit-loss statement. Okay? And some of the more sophisticated ones say this is really sort of an indicator of overall economic activity. Thomas Munn is going to actually make some pretty interesting arguments along those lines, even though I think he often goes way awry. So anyway, so great. So that's kind of the setting of this. I don't know. Any thoughts or anything as we're going? I'm throwing out an occasional not op-ed, but an editorial comment about, unless you have paid attention to current politics. But if anybody has something to pitch back, say so. Andrew.
My question is if like every country's goal is to increase their treasury, why would anyone trade gold or jewels to get something else?
Why would they trade gold or jewels to get something else? Thomas Munn has a really interesting argument about this. We're going to get to Munn. We're going to talk about Desmoulins versus Munn. It's a short little debate that they have. But Desmoulins says we should outlaw the export of gold and silver from Britain. And you know what that means? We have to throw Thomas Munn in jail because British East India Company is exporting gold. Now, it becomes a pretty hostile debate. That's why they're not exactly a school of thought, because Munn doesn't want to go to jail. And also says this is an insane policy that Desmoulins has proposed. So we'll get to that. But somebody's going to be a winner and somebody's going to be a loser is how these guys see it. And I think I first came across these ideas when I was like way back in probably, I don't know, it's like, what grade are you in when you're 12? Sixth grade? I must have been in sixth grade. Probably was, I don't know. Who knows? But we were going to go, my dad was buying us hunting boots. And I picked out a pair of hunting boots and I got these boots home and I opened up the box and there's a piece of paper in there that was left by the bootmakers union or whatever it was. And the paper says, congratulations on buying these American-made boots. And it says, if we buy foreign goods, we get the goods and they get the money. But if we buy American goods, we get the goods and we keep the money. That was my introduction to economics. Fortunately, it didn't take. One of my colleagues, who is no longer here, not an economics colleague, not in EBA, but a guy from a totally different department. Very nice guy, but he didn't know anything about economics. Once he was always complaining about free trade and free markets. He's just like, oh, this is awful. And he gave me an article from some obscure conservative, well, it is conservative journal. And he said it was the problem with foreign trade, with free trade today. And the argument was Adam Smith made this argument for free trade, and Adam Smith is a big fan of free trade, but even Adam Smith would hate free trade today when he saw what was happening. Because today, we import all our goods, goods, and we export our capital. And Smith would have hated that. Does that sound like a problem to you? If we import all our goods and we export all our capital, what's your reaction? Andrew is shaking his head. He's putting his thumb up. Well, what is your reaction? My reaction? I burst out laughing. I thought, wow, this guy that wrote this article thinks that a negative number can equal a positive number. Or else he just has absolutely no idea what he's talking about, or he's incapable of he doesn't know anything about, he doesn't know, well, what I actually said, I was sitting in my office, is not the kind of thing we say around Hillsdale. But the guy's an idiot. We're going to see why. And it's because that can't possibly be so. Well, why not? Let's think about what this whole balance of trade thing is. And so we're still on trade here. Let's go to the mercantilist world for a second and just think about it. No, let's go back before the mercantilists and think about the balance of trade. Why is it that I read that article and just burst out laughing and thought, oh, this is just silly. This isn't even an argument. Let's take the simplest case. This is the international balance of payments that we're going to talk about. So I don't even want balance of trade yet. I'm going to put down a balance of payments statement. And we're going to be some particular country, so we'll just call that domestic. So we can be US or Britain, I don't care, whatever, France, whoever you like. And so we're going to think about the very simplest case. Goods trade for goods. We're bartering, right? Okay. This is going to be foreign acquisition of our stuff and our acquisition. Let's see. Of foreign stuff. And stuff is probably the correct word to use here. Great. Okay. In the simplest world of barter, what does that mean? We send them goods and they send us goods in exchange. Okay? Great. So we get imports and they get exports. Okay? From our standpoint, our exports, that's them getting our goods. And we'll use M for imports because we're economists and don't know any better. No, it's because we don't want to use I, because I is reserved for other things. So exports, and that must be equal. That's the balance of payments. We get their goods, they get our goods, we traded, right? In fact, here's a real world example of it. Roman galleys used to go off the coast of North Africa way back. There were tribes with which they actually got along so poorly they couldn't get off the galley and go meet with the tribe. But what they could do was the Roman galley would come up, they'd row ashore, dump some trade goods on the shore, and then they'd go back and get in their galley, and then the tribes who were standing off the coast, standing away, would then go over, pick up the trade goods, and leave the stuff they were leaving in exchange. If they got together, apparently they were so hostile to each other, they start killing each other, they could still trade by just keeping their social distance. I guess that's where social distancing was invented. Wow. Why didn't the tribes just run off with the Roman goods and not leave anything? Reputation, yeah. This is an ongoing game. If they leave stuff that's worth trading, they can keep this going. So they got the gains from trade, even though they don't like each other. So man is the trading animal. Well, there it is. Okay, but that's not the mercantilist world. They live in a more complicated world where there's also treasure. So we'll just call it gold. So if the foreigners get our stuff, that's our exported goods, but also our gold exports, right? I'll just have that stand for gold exports. But if we get their stuff, it's our imports of their things plus the gold that we get from them, the imports. Right? Right. Yeah, simple. Okay? That's us getting, that's them getting our stuff. And that must be equal. We're trading. Cool. Let's do a little bit of super simple mathematics, like subtract that from both sides, subtract that from both sides. And that gives us exports minus imports from our standpoint equals gold imports minus gold exports. Right? Right. Okay. Cool. If exports are greater than imports, what do you think is true over here? Tavio.
Then
If that one's positive,
it goes in the same direction, right?
good. You've already beaten the guy. You've already beaten the guy that wrote that article, as we'll see. Okay. A positive must be, not only that, they're equal. All I did was, okay, right. So this is what Munn and people like that are getting at. If we can export more than we import, let's say, I think there's an example in your reader where we export 220,000 pounds sterling, but at the same time we imported 200,000. How much do you think we get over here? This would probably come to, well, we must have made 20,000 in gold. Wow. That's what it looks like to me. Yep. Okay. The difference between the exports and imports will be paid in gold, and that's in our favor. We just made 20,000 pounds sterling in gold, or however we're measuring it, right? Cool. That's what Munn and the others are getting at. They want to have a trade surplus so that they get gold flowing into the country. That's the idea. Cool. Wow. Okay. What do I want to say about that? Oh, all kinds of things. Not that, though. Skip that. Treasure is accumulating. If we do this successfully, treasure is going to accumulate. We got gold flowing into the country, profit for the nation, we think, prosperity, strength. This is great. Can this go on forever?
no, because eventually you either have all the gold or someone else does.
Okay, but we're trading the Spanish or mining it in the New World. Maybe they're getting it out. We're getting all the gold. Isn't that great? What happens if we get more and more and more gold?
Wouldn't you eventually run out of stuff to give for the gold?
Oh, we just, we'll put the peasants to work, have them keep working at it. Maybe. But before that, something else will happen. Maura. What?
Does it create inflation?
Oh, more and more money, gold. What do you think happens when you expand the money supply? The value of the money goes down. That is to say, prices go up, right? Munn even recognizes this. He says a sufficient inflow of specie, they refer to this stuff as specie. Specie is just monetized gold or silver. That's what specie refers to. And sometimes students write species. No, that's a whole bunch of different kinds of animals or something. Specie is monetized gold, silver, precious metal. And Munn says a sufficient inflow of specie causes prices to rise. So some of them recognize this. And so here's the problem with what happens if they are successful with their with their policy. The consequences of I'm going to put it in quotation marks, but successful mercantilist trade policy will be that, first of all, gold accumulates. Gold or silver, they're on various standards. Okay. But when gold accumulates, domestic prices rise. Relative to foreign prices. Okay, our prices are going up compared to the French price. We're Britain. So we're getting all this gold coming in. Our prices start going up, and the French prices aren't. Uh-oh. And that means that the terms of trade change. Okay. We used to have a big cost advantage, I guess, in terms of stuff we were making, but that's dwindling. That's going away because as our prices go up, the French goods become more attractive to our people and also to the French. Uh-oh. And in fact, that means that X begins to decline and M increases. The French are less interested in our goods, and our people are more interested in the French goods because of the price changes. The trade surplus shrinks. And if it really goes, it's going to reverse. I just say reverses. The specie inflow shrinks. And then it goes the other way if it gets bad enough. And exports are now less than our imports because of that differential. This has a name. This is called the specie flow mechanism. And it was first identified by two critics of the mercantilists, and one of them is John Locke, you know about him, and the other is David Hume. Locke, of course, you probably know about from some course, Western Heritage, I think. Don't you read Locke? 2 treatises on government, some excerpts, something like that, developing ideas of individual rights and things. Well, John Locke is one of the people who identifies what's happening, and also David Hume, another important Scottish Enlightenment thinker. These 2 guys identify that. And they also, in doing this, identify the quantity theory of money. That is, the more money you have, the higher the prices are going to be. That's the origins of inflation. And so it turns out that this program that we thought as mercantilists was so great might not be sustainable. In fact, it's not sustainable. It won't go on and on forever. And it's not just because we ran out of things to sell. We never even got to that point. To make it worse, some of the mercantilists try to sustain it. How could we sustain it? Well, let's make it illegal to export gold. Oh, good, that'll help. That'll just make the inflation worse and make it harder to make payments. Restrictions on imports will just make it illegal to import stuff. That's not going to work. They try to get new sources of gold as well. And there's another backdrop to this, is that this is the time of the expansion into the New World, and the Spanish in particular are getting a bunch of gold from their territories and bringing it into Europe. And generally speaking, because of the inflow of gold from the New World, there's already an inflation going on in addition to what happens here. So it just accentuates this, accelerates it, and that's not a successful policy. Okay, good? Good. What about today? How do things change today? This part of the lecture to me is interesting because the mercantilists kind of didn't get some of this stuff, but they did understand balance of payments. They didn't recognize what was going to happen. But Thomas Munn, a mercantilist, would have no trouble understanding what I'm about to say. Modern mercantilists are clueless on this. That is, some of the people in Congress or whatever, this is just like magic to them. Mercantilism is not what it used to be, I guess. I would say, let's go back to this balance of payments. Let's look at it. Let's expand it a little bit. Because how do we balance these things? If we have exports more than imports today, what happens? If we have imports more than exports, which does the U.S. have? Who knows whether the U.S. exports or imports? I'm not going to ask you to give me an answer, but who knows that is the U.S. a net exporter or a net importer? Who doesn't know? Okay. Well, guess what? The United States imports more than it exports. Good? There's been a lot of discussion of this. How do we balance these things? Well, today it's capital flows. And the mercantilists themselves didn't recognize this until one very late guy, James Stewart, Steuart, sometimes called the last mercantilist. He made this argument that maybe foreign investments could also balance trade. The thing is, there was very little foreign investment then, so no wonder they didn't think of it. But today, we don't have much in the way of gold flows. So let's go ahead and write it down again. X plus, this is the foreign acquisition of our stuff, and this is our acquisition of the foreign stuff. Okay? Gold exports plus, what else? Capital outflow. That's us buying, wait, I got it backwards. Capital inflow, okay? That's China buying our assets, or like domestic assets or something like that, right? And then us, well, we get their goods, or we get their money, or their gold, or capital outflow. Stocks, bonds, etc., shares in a foreign country, right? Okay, that's what those things are. That's a capital outflow from our standpoint. Okay, if I go and buy a share of stock in a Chinese company, say, that's capital flowing out of the United States. Got it? And if Chinese buy a U.S. Treasury bond or something like that, that's capital flowing into our country. Cool. Now we've got ready to go. So let's go ahead and do our little math thing again. And we get exports minus imports. I'll subtract M from both sides. Let's get the gold things over here. Oh, those are equal. Remember that. It's balance of payment sheet. Exports. And so then we'll subtract that from both sides. So there's gold imports minus gold exports. And then we'll subtract that from both sides. Capital outflow minus capital inflow. And so, great. In today's world, that's basically either, gold's two ways to think of this. Either that's nothing, there's almost no gold flows, or really gold is demonetized, so you could just think of it as another good that's being shipped back and forth. Okay? Oh, it doesn't matter. It's not very big. That's zero in the modern world. Okay? Good. Let's see, where does that, so we're just going to take the zero away. Where does that leave us? That leaves us here. Capital outflow minus capital inflow. Let's see, and for the United States, this is negative. We import a lot of stuff, don't export nearly the value that we import, right? It's been that way for quite a while. What do you think this is? Tavio, you may as well handle it again. It's a capital inflow. A capital inflow? Do you remember why I said I started laughing at that one thing, that paper that guy gave me? The guy said, we're importing all our goods and exporting all our capital. Wow. Mathematical econ. Negative number equals a positive number. Yeah, right. Actually, I read that and I thought, this guy has absolutely no idea what a balance of payment story is. Okay, well, he never took Econ 2.0, whatever teaches that. But he could have actually looked it up online, too, to see what the U.S. trade flows are. And it took me, literally, I timed it, 30 seconds to look it up. Now, I have a PhD in economics, so I got to thinking about it. This guy's not a PhD in economics. He was something else. So it probably would have taken him 5 minutes to look it up. It's like this is the kind of research that we do when we are experts on international trade, but we're not economists. And I read this and I thought, my reaction to this is that we have people making what they think are serious arguments in Washington, D.C. today who don't know any more than that guy about these things. I told a whole bunch of you in this room, well, is it a problem that we are importing more than we export, but sending all our capital out? And most of you didn't recognize that I'd said anything stupid. It's just incredibly stupid and wrong and impossible. Not just stupid and wrong, it's impossible. Okay? You need to know this stuff. You need to understand that. I didn't put any economic theory down here. This is just basic accounting. It's an accounting identity. It's not like, well, in theory that holds, but maybe the theory is false. What are you talking about? We just added it up. It's just the way it adds up. That's all it was. So, important to understand that. Every single one of you is a Hillsdale Econ student or political economy. You need to know this, right? Right, and you're going to know it perfectly. Okay? Before we're done, I insist on it. It'll be on the midterm, it'll be on the final. Got it? Seriously, you got to know that that's like, this guy was wrong. You can't have there are all kinds of debates we can have about trade, but they should be about reality. Do we want free trade? Do we not want it? There are actually arguments we can have that are rational, sensible arguments, but that's not one. You can't say that a negative number and a positive number are equal and have me do anything other than say, oh my gosh. I'm just glad that guy that wrote that didn't have any real political power. But anyway, where were we? Ranting and raving at this point. Well, so the position of the United States, I got a whole bunch of more to say about this. I don't know, does anyone have any opinions or thoughts? 4 minutes, and I could use this to start talking about something that I wouldn't be able to finish. Let me just point out that for the United States, that's the situation that we have been in for quite a while. Is it good or is it bad? That's a very different question. You say, you thumbs up, it's good, okay? Well, we get goods, great, and we get foreign investment, could be good. Anyone think it's bad? I have some students I know who are not here today, or they're in the other section, who would say, yeah, it's been pretty bad. We're really concerned about China, and guess who's exporting all the stuff to us, and guess who's getting our... well, I can't look at something like that and say good or bad. I can just say, look, that's the situation. And I'm going to come back and talk about this a little bit more because it's totally relevant to what these mercantilists are talking about. Is it good or bad to have a positive, to have a trade surplus or trade deficit? I don't know. We're getting goods that we want, but maybe it has some negative consequences, or maybe not. What's the investment in? That's a good question. Who is investing? What's happening with it? Well, let's come back and talk about that next time. Okay? And we won't even develop any final answers, but I'll give you at least some stuff so you can think about this intelligently. All right. Now, sign up for that race. They will send, if you do, they will send you training schedules, multiple training schedules for all distances. It's awesome.